What's going on, everybody? And I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at Manchester City versus Leicester. Man City won the game 1-0. And before we get into that, check out both my books on Amazon. There's links in the description below. And also be sure to check out Keyframe. There's a link to that as well. That's how I make all my videos, and it's a great tool. But let's get right into it. So Manchester City built from the back using their typical structure that they've been going with all season in their first two lines of build-up. So they go with two more narrow central defenders with two narrow fullbacks, primarily focusing their positioning on the half space as their starting point, and at the point is Rodgers as the lone midfielder and the single pivot. Now further forward between the lines and occupying each of the central corridors in more advanced positions are their three attacking midfielders and their false nine Ferran Torres. Then, holding the full width, we have our two wingers in the wide areas. For Leicester, they played a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-2-2-2, whichever you want to call it. But the tendencies of this were to have advanced wide midfielders, connected holding midfielders, and then two forwards that typically one looks to take away the option of Rodri, and the other looks to dictate where Manchester City can circulate the ball to. So here we have the two forwards of Leicester, Jamie Vardy playing higher, James Maddison positioning himself on Rodri, looking to guide the possession of Manchester City into Kyle Walker, the right fullback. Then behind him we have our two central midfielders and our two higher wide midfielders. And now the positioning of the fullbacks in relation to the Leicester City wide midfielders is very interesting because of the proximity. It puts the fullbacks in with the Leicester City wide midfielders, so they have a very short distance to press, but when they do press, the vertical compactness of Leicester by these heightened positions of their wide midfielder is disrupted a little bit, and now the occupation of the advanced areas in central positions, typically always with three players, but Bernardo Silva is just off our screen here. And now when the press is initiated and the defense shifts further forward, then we now have space in between the lines and a numerical superiority situation in favor of Manchester City going forward. So with three players between the lines, these three players will typically pin the entire back four, positioning themselves between each pair of defenders, and now the wingers would be left free. The varying position and the varying height of these attacking midfielders look to overemphasize their pinning to highlight the numerical superiority through the wide areas. But how Leicester were able to neutralize this is one of their holding midfielders or one of their central midfielders would then drop deeper, staggering their lines, and use his cover shadow to block the pass into the advanced attacking midfielder. So this would allow the fullback to then span across the full width of the field and adequately defend with the pressure. As the two forwards, now they share the responsibility of blocking access to the central pivot. In Leicester's shape, they also had the tendency to split their two central midfielders a bit wider and had their wide midfielders go quite narrow in relationship to their central midfielder. So oftentimes it will look like these players were on top of each other, with the two forwards still maintaining the highest position and looking to block access into Rodri. But this positioning was really meant to get good access to the fullbacks, and because of the two forwards using their cover shadow to block Rodri, a third line pass into Ferran Torres wasn't accessible either, so the splitting of their central midfielder didn't cause any potential avenues to progress for Manchester City. Now we see the versatility from Kyle Walker and Cancelo playing the fullback position. So now, rather than being narrow, he goes completely inverted Kyle Walker off the right-hand side. And what this does is it creates space out in the wide area, which is emphasized by Gundogan's vertical run in the half space to then pin the fullback to a deeper position, and it'll open up a direct pass for the winger Gabriel Jesus in the wide area. So just by this 10-yard movement of Kyle Walker, they've now freed up and vacated the entire wide area from Leicester City's presence and allowed them to have a direct line to progress through in the wide area and exploit this 2v1 against the fullback of Leicester City. Now with the positioning in midfield from Manchester City looking to pin the entire back four with these three advanced players, we can see that each attacking midfielder is positioned between a partnership of their defensive counterpart. And what this did was, again, it looked to narrow the back four and release and create 2v1s from the wide areas into the half space. And now we see the two midfielders from Leicester looking to block the strong side half space, and then as they shift over, they would then block the new strong side half space with the advanced wide midfielders oriented towards the fullbacks and ready to press. When Leicester City were in possession, Schmeichels split both of their central defenders, creating a makeshift back three, and the two holding midfielders for Leicester created these press-resistant wide structures that Manchester City looked to press very intensely right from the start. So Grealish, Bernardo Silva, Ferran Torres, and Gabriel Jesus would make up their front four, and they'd play in their 4-2-4, giving them very early access to the first line, often looking to press from out to in, blocking the fullback access as well as the access to the double pivot, and force them more narrow to try and create a more advantageous ball recovery in the final third. So now we see the Leicester City build-up shape with our two central defenders, and now the partnership of the central defender, holding midfielder, and fullback. So these press-resistant triangles were the source and the avenue that Leicester City would look to progress against Man City's 4-2-4, or in this situation, their 4-3-3 early on in the match. And again, positional fluidity in the defensive phase from Manchester City to be able to switch between structures depending on the implications that Leicester City gave them in possession. So again, now we have our 4-2-4 in our mid block, as we just saw the 4-3-3. Now our 4-2-4 blocks access to the central midfielder, splits access to the weak side central midfielder, and makes the number 10 James Maddison inaccessible to the ball, and often force them long or force them to play third line direct passes through the half space. And that's going to wrap up the analysis. Just wanted to get a quick one out for the Manchester City-Leicester game, as it was a super interesting one tactically. I just want to give you guys a brief overview of what was going on in the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.